So let me turn, and I know I only have a few minutes. Let me turn to the impact of COVID-19 more specifically on these developments, on the use of technology in law, legal education, and the like. Same caveat. What we mean by the post-corona world is a little bit in the eye of the beholder. There are some urgent issues, no doubt about it. And if you permit me to bring it again back to home, and by home I mean legal education and university education, some of these issues are quite urgent. It's really remarkable what's happened over the last several weeks, as is certainly in your lines of work, wherever you find yourself. First, we faced in legal education, by no means unique to the United States, a sort of on-off switch in late March. And literally one day we were teaching in person, teaching our classes in person. The very next day we were all at home, and we were across the country. Some schools moved a little more slowly, and by slowly I mean a few days rather than a few hours, to online platform. Colleagues of mine that had never heard of Zoom quickly and unevenly adapted their courses and their teaching to this new technology. And to the great credit of our students, and here the enormous unsung heroes in this regard are the students who made these adaptations, including some who were about to graduate and found themselves all of a sudden ripped from their social connections at school and were learning this at home. The question, though, that I want to put out is the juxtaposition between what now, which is really the question that we were forced to answer in late March. What now, and what next? So the what now question is something that we deal with in whether it's legal education or other professional settings every day, right? We're going to deal with it today. We're going to deal with it tomorrow. We're going to deal with it next week. I stopped myself. I was going to say the more interesting question. That's plenty interesting. A different question is what next? In the university setting, in the U.S. and abroad, Miklos and I were talking about this just before we came on the air. It's really remarkable, the scrambling and the planning and the cogitating that universities are doing to figure out what's next, by which we mean what's next for the next academic year. Some of you saw the news yesterday, literally yesterday. Cambridge University in the UK announced they're going to be fully online for the entirety of the next academic year. About 3 weeks ago, McGill University in Canada, in Montreal, made the same decision. Notre Dame University, very prominent university, also with the law school in the United States a few weeks ago, announced the opposite. And so have some other American universities. So when I speak here in the later part of May, where I am, we're still trying to figure that out and figure out what the different models are of education. I want to suggest in the last few minutes before turning to the next part of the program, that the questions of what next, whether in the educational context or any aspects of the legal professional context, the answer to the question of what are we going to do next will in some fundamental ways turn on two important considerations, at least two important considerations. One has to do with proximity and the value of proximity, and the other has to do with the provision of value and the value of services to clients and the like. Just a couple words on proximity. We are all working remotely now. Almost all of us. Let me rephrase that. Those of us who have the luxury in our professional settings to be able to work remotely and have the technology available to do so are doing so. Most aspects, not all, but most aspects of the legal profession are doing that. That has social cost and consequence. I'll leave to others to speak about and write about. They are not trivial, right? But from a professional vantage point, they present some opportunities and challenges. To begin with the challenges, it is harder to forge new relationships with clients, relationships with individuals that are not sustained. I have the great opportunity, as I'm sure many of you, to connect through Zoom with old friends and catch up with them and have conferences and meetings and commiserate and talk to them professionally, socially, and the like. It's harder to do that with folks with whom you don't have pre-existing relationships. So just to take a prosaic example, it's easier for me to shift to online teaching with students who I have exposure to and have gotten to know prior to that than it will be for the fall when the incoming class comes in and there are students who I've never met and will meet for the very first time vis-a-vis Zoom. And the same is true with respect to your particular clients. But here's a nasty secret, or something that we don't want to talk about because the optics don't sound good. There are also some opportunities presented through the availability of Zoom or WebEx or whatever platform you use that wouldn't exist if we were doing things in person. Let me just give you this anecdote from my day today. Here's what I'm doing today. I have the honor and the privilege to be able to be speaking to you, obviously on a very different time zone here in Hungary. Following about an hour following this conference, I'm going to be on a webinar listening to colleagues at Harvard Law School talk about legal and ethical issues in connection with COVID-19. A little bit later, there's a gathering of about a dozen of us, law professors from different law schools, to talk about coronavirus and legal issues, things that are near and dear to our hearts. A little bit after that, I'm going to be giving a presentation at a group of a lawyer conference, about 200 or 300 lawyers in New York City, and on from there. The point I'm making is not to brag about my schedule. This would be typical for many of you too. That would be impossible with the expectation that I would, if I were here in Budapest with you now, which I would love to be, I wouldn't be able to do any of those other things. And so when a lot of us gather together, I'm sure you've had this experience and say, I'm busier now than I've ever been. We're not just saying, oh, woe is us, anything like that. We have the great privilege to be healthy and happy and working successfully. But it's just our bandwidth is expanded to a significant degree, and we're able to do more than we would otherwise be able to do because of the fact that we can work remotely. And so that raises a question about whether what we're seeing in terms of the lack of direct proximity, or to put it the other way around, the use and utilization of technology to do professional work and have connections, will be something we will want to sustain, even in the post-coronavirus world. There's something appealing, I'll just be perfectly honest, with being able to do 4 or 5 interesting things and to connect with colleagues around the world in a day or in a week that would simply not be available under usual circumstances. There's something appealing about not schlepping to the airport, getting on an airplane, flying across the country or across the world to have a day's conference. As enjoyable as that is, that takes a toll. So I know I'm saying what you've already been thinking about. So the question of proximity will loom very large, and whether that will continue to be sustained and sustainable, that is what we're doing now, presents a very interesting question that I hope we'll talk about in Q&A. Lastly, the point about value. We provide value to our clients as lawyers or as allied legal professions by virtue of our success in yielding good outcomes. The old saying, what have you done for us lately? And also in our personal attention. Lawyers as counselors, working with clients, giving advice, giving the benefit of our wisdom. That has historically been very difficult to measure, still is very difficult to measure, but this will be very interesting and important to see, is whether there'll be a different conception of value as we go forward. So let me conclude by bringing it back to the issue of technology, which is very much on our minds, the reason we're gathered together. We have utilized technology and developed technology platforms, whether we've invented apps or new techniques or used predictive analytics or developed AI machine learning techniques in order to provide value to clients, in order to aid in the access to justice movement, in order to make money, and all of these developments. How we think about utilizing technology in order to address the proximity issue and the overall shifting concept of value will be very, very interesting. Which brings me to the end, which is what we're doing right now, which is speaking on Zoom. Zoom provide or WebEx or whatever the platform is, the next Zoom. What we're finding ourselves doing is engaging in new ways of teaching. I know I am, and I'm happy to talk about that more, and many of my colleagues are. We are finding new ways of interaction with clients and with friends and family. Well, maybe not with family, but with professional friends and professional contexts in various different ways. And we're also developing, I haven't really touched on it in my remarks, but I will here, broader and even deeper set of professional interactions is, as we say in English, the $100,000 question. It's a question that's very much on my mind in thinking about this from the vantage point of legal education, but also professional education. And with that, I'm happy to end. It's again been a very, very great privilege to be able to join with you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm happy to continue this conversation. I want to thank again Miklos for giving me that opportunity. So thanks. Hope I've kept close enough to my time.
Well, thank you very much. A lot of food for thoughts. Here comes the first question. I think it's a great one. While understanding that online learning teaching seems to be good for students already engaged in the curriculum, do you think it will not be extremely difficult to onboard new students? And will there be an expected depreciation quality of graduates as a result? We just talked about this because I think this is in fact one of the most interesting things. I just told you that one of our associates just been accepted by Northwestern, and he might have to do online course. Onboarding students, he will not have the same experience as an online student. How to onboard, and do you expect a depreciation of quality of graduates as a result of online learning and online teaching?
So Miklos, I love the question and I hate the question. I love the question because, of course, it's a terrific question. It goes right to the heart of what we've been thinking about in legal education, and I know colleagues throughout the world are thinking about it. I hate the question because I agree with its premise, and it's very hard to admit as a law professor and as a former law dean with an interest in encouraging students to come to our law school, encouraging foreign students, international students to come there. Because the fact is, the in-person connection, the relationships you develop one-on-one in the classroom, outside the classroom, the social connections are absolutely critical. When we say to interested students in Hungary, come to Chicago, spend the year at Northwestern, study in our environment, get to know Chicago, we're saying something that is intrinsically an in-person social and professional connection. So my answer is yes, that value is reduced. No doubt about it, when the law school shifts to an online remote platform, and there's really no way around that connection. Now we can finesse it as we are now. Maybe this persists for just a semester, and some students are starting in the spring. Maybe there's a hybrid model, so folks do come. We decide the immigration restrictions that might impose. That's another discussion. Maybe students come and they take fewer classes, or some of them are hybrid models. But those are all adaptations built on the premise that underlies the question that we are sacrificing some significant part of our educational value, and that's true of brand new students coming in, whether they're LLM students or they're incoming JD students. Now, having said that, and I feel very strongly about this, the task and the responsibility that we have as legal educators, wherever we are, is to make our educational modalities, the way in which we teach and engage with students, as connected to their professional goals and their educational goals in a remote setting.
Oops. I don't know if it's only my. Okay.
Oh, can you hear me?
Now you're back. I think we lost you for like 2 or 3 seconds. At least
okay.
I lost you for a couple of minutes.
I'll just begin the sentence. I think that faculty members at law schools who think of remote teaching as basically putting on a tie, standing before their Zoom camera, and recording their lectures just as they would give it in class, and then saying to their students, and turn on the camera, turn on your recording button and listen to my remote lectures, are doing a grave disservice to students who are coming in and expect more. Even Zoom in the way it is now, to say nothing of the development of new technology, even Zoom now has the capacity to enable us to engage in much more creative use of teaching and developing of resources that close that gap. Now, it's not going to close that gap completely, but we can do a better and more intentional job. I think this summer period is absolutely critical, wherever we find ourselves in legal education, to develop systematic new ways of teaching so that we can answer the question that you pose from your colleagues. Why should I sign up and go to law school now when all I'm doing is watching a disembodied faculty member teach these kinds of classes? So I'll just summarize it by saying we can do a much better job, but quite frankly, we could never do as good a job as to close completely the gap between the in-person experience and the online and the remote experience.
Yeah, thank you. Next one. Which three skills do you think will be the most significant for lawyers in the post-coronavirus world?
So interestingly enough, I think, thank you for that question. I think the kinds of skills will be quite consistent with what I and others thought would be the critical skills that new lawyers and allied professionals would need to develop, irrespective of the coronavirus. So, but if anything, they've just been manifestly made more important. So, the ability to communicate and work in teams and develop what we used to call, not that long ago, soft skills or leadership skills, various forms of communication skills are critical, and law schools historically have not done a tremendously good job of teaching them. On the theory, I think the erroneous theory that you can't really teach that in law school. That's ineluctable. It's like what Louis Armstrong said about jazz when he was asked to describe jazz. He said, "Man, if you don't play, don't even mess with it. I can't describe it to you." Well, that's not helpful. So educators can help inculcate in students these kinds of skills, and I think in this post-coronavirus world, particularly if many of us are working remotely, those skills will be more rather than less important. Number one. Number two is, I think, interdisciplinary skills, multidisciplinary skills. And you and I, we've had this discussion at different times. I think those are absolutely critical. We're in a world in which lawyers need to understand business and technology and vice versa. So the law business technology interface is crucially important. Clients say so, judges say so, the poor and the disadvantaged say so. In order to solve society's wicked problems, we need to develop these interdisciplinary skills. That will be even more true in the coronavirus world. Look at how lawyers are called upon to give advice about public health responses, to litigate issues that are happening in the U.S. and elsewhere over lockdowns and all of that, to figure out how to work on our public health ecosystem. Those are multidisciplinary problems. And the third, and I know here I'm preaching to the choir, developing more skills in technology and utilization of technology and having access and knowledge about technology will be increasingly important. And I think even more so after the crisis abates.
Thanks. The next one is actually, I'm going to raise this question, but many others raise the very same question from a similar, from a different angle, but but almost the same. So it's going to cover a lot of people's question. Sure. Technology has made us able to do the same as, or in certain cases, even more than what we were able to do before the pandemic. I do agree with that. However, what do you think about building and maintaining trust between clients and legal professionals remotely? Does technology provide the same extended bandwidth in this term too?
So again, great question. All these are great questions. I agree with the premise. I think that the use of technology, the development of technology, and we could talk about technology that's worked well and technology that's worked awfully, right? Not well. The ones that have worked well have not just been more sophisticated in terms of the use of the hardware and the software, but have been able to develop and nurture trust in important ways. And it's a separate conversation, but the debates and discussions about the use of machine learning and artificial intelligence and the rhetoric about we're replacing lawyers with robots and all of that, although wildly overblown, captures an important anxiety, which is that we're basically decoupling the human connection and decreasing trust, algorithmic bias and all of those issues. So I think that's critically important. To me, in order to maintain and improve that trust, what we're going to need to do is to navigate basically this problem of the lack of human connection or the same kind of human connection if we persist in working in a remote world, and figure out how technology aids that human interaction and advances that human interaction rather than stands as a bulwark. So again, I'll use the example of Zoom, which I know is not the world's most sophisticated technology. It's not unique to law, but with an agile use of Zoom or other platforms that might be developed, whether you're talking about WebEx or Hotshot or other technologies that you might be familiar with. There are capacities and capacities that can be developed that enable us to have an enormous amount of durable connections, right? Helped by technology, but not replaced by technology. Richard Susskind, who I mentioned before, and I want to give another shout out to, has written this wonderful new book called The Future of Online Courts. He had no idea it'd be as important as it would be when it came out, 6 months ago. But it also provides a really interesting window into one aspect of the profession, which is courts, which are preternaturally human interactions. Folks, jurors looking at witnesses, evaluating witness credibility, clients appearing before judges. We're going to lose that if we persist in having online courts and remote courts. But as we speak, folks are developing technology solutions and technological solutions to enable individuals to be able to have that trust relationship in the course of the trial system, right? But doing so in an efficient way that can persist even in the face of a pandemic or even in the face of other disruptions that make those human connections difficult to maintain. So I'm hopeful. Okay. I'm an optimist.
Yeah, that's good. Do you think there's a lot of question again around tuition? Do you think that the online learning will make U.S. universities more affordable? There are some people who, more explicit about this, complain more about the high tuition fees of U.S. law schools. Don't you think that it's going to change U.S. law schools? Online learning can change U.S. law school in a manner that it will maybe lower the fees and make it more affordable for people coming from overseas?
Sure. So I just said I was an optimist. Now I want to say I'm a pessimist with respect to this issue, or cynical is a better way to put it. I don't think it will in the short run, because most of what drives high rates of tuition in American legal education, and I, guilty as charged, our rates of tuition by any measure are, which is why the question is asked, are extraordinarily high, whether you're talking about students coming in to study for a JD degree, LLM degree, or the like. The reason law professors and deans often say, oh, well, high cost, high touch legal education, we have to pay expensive faculty, fixed costs. That's some of it. But most of the reason has to do with what economists call the inelasticity of demand, meaning so long as folks flock to American law schools, both from abroad and within the US, particularly elite American law schools will charge what the market will bear. Now, I don't say that with any braggadocio. I'm not proud of that. I mean, in some ways that raises a social justice question of whether we should just pay what the market will bear. But I think the question of whether law schools will see tuition go down, whether for foreign students or for American students, can only be answered when we see whether and to what extent prospective students vote with their feet. If students stop coming to certain law schools and defer because they don't want to just take an online or mostly online platform, then of course the market will respond to that, and U.S. law schools will have to respond. But until that happens, I think that law schools will by and large persist, for better or worse, with their basic economic model, which presupposes a very high rate of tuition for what they see as providing a very high value. One other quick point, as I know there are other questions, just very footnote on that. We also in the United States sustain that high rate of tuition because of our guild system. You have to have a JD to practice law. And if you get an LLM degree, if you want to stay and practice in New York or whatever, you have to meet, check all of these particular boxes. If that were removed and you didn't have to actually go to law school for 3 years or get an LLM degree for 1 year to practice law, then tuition would plummet. Right? Because then the marketplace would compete for different models. There'd be a 1-year law school, there'd be a 4-year law school, there'd be a law school mostly staffed by adjuncts, and there'd be a law school with full-time faculty. There'd be a Yale and a Harvard on the one hand, and there'd be a fill in the blanks on the other. So if that changes, if there's significant regulatory change, as for example, we've seen in the UK with the Solicitors Regulatory Authority, then that will drive tuition down.
Yeah, thank you. Look, there are so many questions, and we'd love to raise all of them, each and every of them, but it's impossible. We're conscious of time and also would like to move on to the next section of our event. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Let me just, if you don't mind, I will transfer you as attendee, but if you can, please stay with us. Thanks
I will. Happy
again.
to. Thank you very much. Appreciate the questions.
And then, just for a minute, bear with me for a minute. I'm going to promote a few people to panelists. Those of you who behaved well now became panelists. It's easy as that. There's only one more person. So, and Eric also. Sorry about this technical difficulty. It takes actually much faster. I mean, it just takes much faster to do this than on the conference. When you do this, then there is a switch between panels. Let me introduce first the moderator, Mitch Kowalski. He's a professor in legal innovation at the University of Calgary Law School and a strategic advisor to in-house legal departments and law firms on the redesign of legal service delivery. He is a fellow of the prestigious College of Law Practice Management, a Fast Case 50 Global Legal Innovator, and an author of the critically acclaimed books, The Great Legal Reformation Notes from the Field and The Avoiding Extinction, Reimagining Legal Services for the 21st Century. Mitch is also a former partner at Baker McKenzie and has held several in-house counsel roles. That's your bio, Mitch. I'm glad that you're here, and the floor is yours.
Hey, thanks. Well, welcome everybody. Good evening to everyone in Hungary. I'm in Toronto right now, so it's bright and sunny today. I have a good background, so you can't see all of my hair, and that's good because I'm only about 3 days away from going to a man bun because I haven't been able to cut my hair in some time. Also, my wife has turned our flat into a bakery. Like many people, we're all baking bread these days because there's not a lot else to do at home. So I put on the quarantine 15, as we say in Canada. Listen, a couple comments before we kick into the group. Stemming from Dan's comments, which were really great, is COVID going to change? My point is that many of us have been calling for change for quite some time, and we thought all the pieces were there. We thought that the GFC was that big bang moment, and surely, bad economics is going to drive change. And we can see that hasn't happened, at the pace that we would have liked. Many of us talk about the four, drivers of change. We talk about technology. Surely with technology, that'll change. Surely with competition from new players, surely things will change. Clients demanding more for less, surely that will be the change. Talent coming in, having completely different views on how law should be operated and how we should be delivering. Surely all four of those things will drive change. And it turns out that just a little microbe is now causing us to do far more change very quickly than any of those things that we thought were so vital. It's kind of, for those of you who read War of the Worlds, it's our War of the Worlds moment. And so the question really is, what does this mean? And that's what the panel is here for. I'm going to introduce the panel really quickly. And so we'll start with Eric. Eric Eck is the Market Development Lead Europe for Thomson Reuters. He's speaking here today on his own capacity. He's not speaking for TR. He has 20 years of experience in the business of law, working for established multinational law firms and legal departments, including 7 years founding a tech-enabled legal platform. Next, we have Andrea Miskolczi, who is the former Chief Innovation and Business Development Director at Wolf Thiessen. She's an expert in innovation, business development, and marketing in the legal sector. Andrea's extensive international background includes legal advisory gigs with Linklaters, devising a market-leading legal tech, and client relationship management and branding strategies at Wolf Thiessen. Next, we have Ellen Hayes. Ellen is the co-founder of LexitUp and the managing director of Legalis, a global legal recruitment business. Ellen started her career with one of the world's leading tech companies before working for a U.S. law firm. She then went on to be the CEO of Central Europe for TMP Worldwide, which at that time was the world's leading largest recruitment business, and director of emerging markets at Hudson Legal. And Miklos, you didn't introduce yourself at the start, man, because I'll do it for you. So our host, Miklos Orban, is the co-founder of Lexadap, founder of OPL and Explico. After spending many years at leading firms in London and Budapest, Miklos has spent 7 years as director of regulation at British Telecom. He was responsible for compliance, public policy, regulatory issues across 25 countries in the CEE and Russian CIS regions. He's qualified in both Hungary and New York, and is known for his innovative approach to law, and recently top 3 IT lawyers, excellent, and among the top 100 Hungarian lawyers. So panelists, welcome to the rest of you. Buckle in. We're going to have some good discussion on some good points. Andrea, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
We talk a lot, well, at least people talk a lot. There's a perception that big law has an advantage, or small law has an advantage, or mid law, or where the gaps are, and who's doing what, where, and how, and whether or not size really matters. And so, in your view, from all your experience, what are you seeing out there? Is there such a thing as this innovation gap between small and large firms?
Mitch, I think that the real distinction is not small versus big. As you mentioned, both of them have advantages. Small law firms might be able to make faster decisions, be more agile. Big law firms certainly can have more possibilities to experiment or even to invest, let's say, in technology. I think what's important is rather on other levels to make distinction. For example, leadership. Do we have a visionary leadership at the given law firm, small or big or mid-sized? Or the leadership is kind of rather a day-to-day management function? Partnership. Do we have an aligned partnership at the firm, or do we have a collection of rather independent entrepreneurs? Another important distinction, does the firm, and of course it relates to the previous two I mentioned, does the firm has a long-term focus, a long-term strategy, or it's rather a short-term focus, how it operates? Does it have an experimental culture where you can fail and try new things and fail, or the culture is rather, okay, no failure, no risk, so no risk tolerance? And finally, an important, there are many more, of course, but finally what I wanted to mention is also how the firm, and again, big or small, how does the firm understand innovation? Is it just to invest in software for them and that's it, that's innovation? Or are they able to think about business model changes, review the entire value chain? Daniel also mentioned in the keynote, do they understand that this is what can bring real opportunities? Or they think, okay, we are going to be innovative and just invest in a software. And I would like to emphasize that I think the current situation is an accelerator, but alone this situation will not make magic. So what we will see that those firms who already had these distinctions like long-term vision, visionary leadership, tolerance towards risk, they will continue and they will see the opportunity and they will win in the situation. I don't think that those who haven't seen that there is a change necessary, there is a change going on, that they will now suddenly change. In a way, this is a little bit like a moment of truth, that we will really see who just played innovation theater and who are the ones. I've heard a very good wording or metaphor. It's a moment of or great unmasking. This is the single piece of what we can remember in these times. This is going to be the great unmasking for many leaders and many firms.
I think that's right. I mean, there's an interesting comments that we hear a lot in North America that when the tide goes out, you see who's been swimming naked, which is the same kind of concept, right? I mean, yes. Everybody looks great when there's lots of water around us, and then it goes out and you say, we didn't have the leadership, we didn't have the strategy, and so on. So, and then there are excellent points. I mean, just one follow-up quickly. I guess the thing is, it would seem to me almost that having great leadership in a really large firm would still be a difficult ship to turn, versus good leadership in a smaller firm might allow them to do better towards creating a better innovative approach to the situation. Is that a fair statement, or are you still?
Definitely, smaller firms can act faster. They can be more agile. They have there is a better chance that they have a clear leadership and an aligned partnership. But on the other hand, I think many of the innovations or many of the transformations that we see as innovation require investments. Investments in tech, investments in additional people and training. So that's why I'm not saying that it's only the small or it's only the big. Definitely changing the course of a big ship is difficult, takes time, a lot of negotiations, not a lot of interest. And also, but on the other hand, also you can experiment maybe more. You have the opportunity to fail more or try more things out. A big one.
Good. Thanks, Eric. So, what are you expecting from this post-corona world? Were people ready, or they're not ready? Are we doomed? Are we in for a good thing? What's your take?
Well, we in it, that's for sure. So that's the starting point. What I would like to do is to step back a little bit and understand who is playing what on this, what we call the legal market. And when you look at law firms and the COVID-19 situation, they really do not know if clients are going to pay them or to get the expectation of work in the pipe to come in the future, in the near future. So they're finishing up what they have been on. What's coming next, they have no idea. So they're basically, in echo to Andrea, actually, they're conserving their cash and they're delaying projects and freezing spend. That's what I can see from traveling as of about 2 months ago on different law firms in Europe. So the first consequence is that law firms will focus on the essential. And just to illustrate, there's this tendency to communicate on sectors, industry knowledge. So let's see in 6 months if the specialism will revert to practice for partners. The second stakeholder are the law firm's clients. So some industries will be shaken very hard, just think airlines. In some other industries, some players will be hit harder than others, but in both cases, again, there will be an increased difficulties to get paid for law firms. And law firms are cash machine. They are cash flow engines, right? They are not really asset engines. So some firms will be forced to take risks with their clients, and that is not what they like. So one scenario, and this is already happening in some law firms in Europe, they will slim down, laying off associates and getting rid of sole partners. And there is a real scope for finding those law firms using a junction of a network of temp or on-demand lawyering. So that's what I see as a consequence there. But one stakeholder that nobody really thinks about it is the corporation's shareholders, because they will like to secure as much as possible both their asset and the possibilities for dividends as well. And they will call management to find out ways to cut costs, right? So in most cases, it means relocation for finding cheaper operations. And maybe one of these new outcomes will be the question that is our in-house lawyer immune from being moved to India or to elsewhere? And if so, is it taking this network, this ecosystem, and some of the decision-making to go as well to other places? Then the question is, why do we use expensive Switzerland or USA lawyers? I'm based in Zurich, so I know what I'm talking about being expensive. Yeah. So that's the other aspect. And then the last is about tech. So legal tech, and I much prefer tech for law than legal tech actually, and you can call it digitalization, IT. Obviously, there is an increase, and Dan earlier mentioned about this virtualization of real life activities with all the different devices, Zoom, Team, etc., etc. IQ for a Thomson Reuters product, to mention it. Well, it is just trying to do the same that before, but remote. And when you see the number of options available, it's just crazy. So I see this phenomenon of online business almost the ultimate resistance to change, because it is replacing exactly the same, but managed virtually. So to go back to tech, what I would like to reestablish is that everybody needs to understand there are two fold in tech. There is one thing to do with management, so practice management systems and document management systems for the law firms, or matter management and spend management for in-house team. And then you have the other aspect, which is what I call the augmented lawyer. So it is about writing faster for a lawyer using Contract Express, again, a Thomson Reuters product, but there are plenty of others, or read faster with AI, with Kira, Luminance, Ager, and so on and so on. So that's completed almost by both law firms and in-house, but badly, poorly, superficially. So why? Because the level of adoption is very low, whether in law firms or in-house. It may even be worse in-house than in law firms, actually. So I have this concept of minimal viable adoption, so to say. So basically, and there is more, but is productivity gains available by just hitting hard on the same nail? I don't think so. Keep in mind there are 2,000 legal tech startups out there. I don't know what their future will be with that crisis. There are hundreds of automation engines, but there is more. So what do I expect from this post-corona world? Well, people are going back to what they know. So people are going back to 2008. And basically what happens is the CFO of a large corporation will ask the GC to reduce their spend, both internal and external. The GC will call the law firm and say, look, I need some discounts. We'll call his IT director. I need to find a digitalization product to uncover productivity. The law firms will sort of proceed to a certain extent, waiting for better days. And the in-house legal will be let down by his IT director, because the legal is always the poorest child of the family, right? So keep in mind as well that, for example, implementing a contract lifecycle management software in a Forbes 2000 corporation is a 3 years project. It's very heavy. It's very long to establish. So are firms and legal departments ready? In short, the answer is no, definitely not. There is nothing. There is no secret ready to go IT infrastructure to switch to. That's in contradiction with the necessity to invest in technology, because this is the underlying tool to get productive. So I see maybe three reasons why there is hope, so to say. And I see it with the rise of the need to collaborate, and Dan explained that very well, and Andrea to some point as well. I predict the rise of the platforms, and I would like to just cover in 2 minutes 3 types of platforms. And each of these platforms is answering one question. The first question is, why would each and any law firm reinvent the same delivery challenge to its clients? So when you see this week has been launched a shared investment by CMS, Cooley, and Raja and Tan called LUPL. This initiative is to engage other law firms to turn that into a standard on the market. And that is a way to sort of syndicate different resources to get productivity again. And I think that's very important. But on the same topic, Intap has been laying off 50 people out of 800, and it is a platform as well. So where is that going? We don't know. The second platform is answering a question that is, why would large corporations continue to depend on tools and technology provided by its law firms? I mean, if I were the Air France General Counsel today, and I don't know him, even though I am French, you understood that by my accent, but I would syndicate all my competitors to develop a sort of airline legal best practice solution supported by technology, and make sure that the cost of development is shared, and to incite law firms to use it. And the last is the last question, the last type of platform is really about why not outsource specific legal matters to external service providers. So that is already the case with the claim management for the insurance company, but hey, NDA, more than just the assembly of the document, the service, the repository, who is covered by what, or anything around DPA, which is an absolute pain to deal with in corporation, this can be handled this way. So in conclusion, there is plenty of room to innovate. Andrea, you will be very busy in law and in the business of law, but I think that we are wrong to maintain that in the client law firm relationship, and we need to think differently and to innovate differently.
Well, I think that's very interesting because a lot of that talks about a sense of place and whether or not legal is a service rather than a place, which is a play on Richard Susskind's view that justice, when he talks about his Quarrel on Courts book, is justice a place or is it a service? And so we start to move away from place and bricks and mortar to just servicing our clients and whatever that may form that takes. I think that fits in nicely. I guess I'm a little concerned, for Andrea, because we're all, while she might be busy, everybody's hoarding their cash now. And so Andrea, is this the time really to be spending cash, or are you content to say, battle on and put all the innovation projects on hold now? What's your take on that?
The projects that I've seen and or heard about, the issue in the past was never cash, or okay, you need an investment, but whether really things are used in the practice. So whether you achieve change in the behavior, that is something that for that you don't need a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, approximately 2 years ago or a year ago, there was even a hashtag trending in the legal community: bring back boring.
Yep.
And and the idea was that you don't need fancy tech, AI, and so on to make a real change. And it's a question whether they can really deliver, or what can they deliver. But there is a lot of technology available out there, which is much more simpler, and you can, with the right approach, with looking at understanding that it's about data, you can achieve a lot. So, of course, there will be a sort of period when investment in new tools might not be the first thing to jump on, but making sure that those investments that have been already done, that they really bring value, that they really bring the return on so the investment. That I think that will be an interesting that should be also a focus.
Thanks. So Ellen, so we're talking about a lot of stuff that obviously is going to impact human resources, the talent, the people that drive these businesses. What's your view on this? How is legal resourcing and hiring practices changing, not changing, or will change?
Well, Mitch, when it comes to legal talent, the past few weeks have really been about 3 F's: firing, furloughs, and the rise of freelancers. Today, the lawyer reported that 75% of the UK's largest law firms are furloughing staff. And I think the real question is, how long is it before these become redundancies? Certainly, Eric hit the nail on the head when he said our business is affected. 79% of our US recruitment mandates are on hold. In Europe, that number is around 86%. Of course, there's slight variations, whether these are mergers, partners, associates, in-house counsel, or non-lawyer business support roles. But regardless, law firms are not replacing lawyers when they leave right now. So this environment is something we haven't seen before at such a quick pace, and it has intensified the rise of this new breed of highly qualified freelancers. And that's why I was excited to be here today to really tell you a little bit about, Lex It Up, because this is a platform that has been taking shape over many countries, but we haven't seen it hit Central and Eastern Europe yet. A platform that provides vetted, high caliber freelancers who can be really engaged, quickly and easily. And so this is new for us. It's a simple message: freedom, functionality, and flexibility in freelancing for the CEE markets. And why do we think this timing is right? The estimates are running really that between 20 to 40% of the entire legal workforce will be freelance in 5 years. Now, I don't
Sorry,
know,
what was that again? 22 what?
20 to 40%.
Wow.
I think that's probably an understatement, because we do see that freelancers are signing up to multiple providers such as, PeerPoint, Lawyers on Demand, Vario, in the US, Hire and Esquire. And it will become the norm for a freelancer to have more than 1 gig at a time, sharing their hours amongst a variety of clients. So this is really, the biggest takeaway we're seeing, and that's why we got in the Lex It Up space. Outside of the legal industry, the notion of freelancing and outsourcing, by the way, DLA also reported today they would be outsourcing some of their back office function. This has been around for a long time in non-legal, and law has just now joined the club. So that's our big takeaway, and back to you, Mitch.
Well, okay, so let me just follow up on that. Do you feel, if we're moving into a freelance world, and I agree with you 100%, I think that's the way moving, COVID accelerates that, not just because of the 4 Fs or the 3 Fs rather, but do you think it's fair to say that COVID accelerates it because there are going to be lawyers of a certain caliber with clients who say, gosh, I've been working at home for 2 months now. I'm leaving way too much at the table by staying at a big firm because that's sucking money out of my pocket. And if I can manage my team and plug into some kind of platform where, I save a lot of money and I make more money and maybe I even work less and I still make more money. Is that kind of thought process, I think, happening in the market?
I think that's always been happening in the market, but it will be increased by the fact that some of these people simply, won't have a role currently. Nobody will be hiring, and this will become a new way of life. Many people have selected this as a work-life balance, and in the past, in some markets like ours, the uptake wasn't very high because it wasn't accepted. It's a different business model, but with COVID-19, that so many different business models have been and platforms have been enabled and embraced, and so this is certainly the huge development in the space in talent.
Well, thank you, Miklos. So tying in on that, so business model innovation seems to be on the horizon, but also entrepreneurship. I mean, if you're going to be a freelancer, you're becoming much more entrepreneurial in that sense than you would be just going to the same old office year after year after year. What are you seeing, or what's your view on that?
I think this is one of the most important questions in the legal industry, because when people talk about innovation and what's going to come, they tend to focus on IT solutions and legal tech. But I think the real innovation is with business model innovation. Let me say why I'm saying this. Well, we all know how law firms make money. In most of the cases, they charge the number of hours they spent with the underlying work, and the hourly rates are determined by the lawyer's seniority. This is basically the bedrock of the law firm business. Your promotion, your salary, everything boils down to hours. Everyone knows that this is old-fashioned, that people believe that this has been around for centuries, so it can be changed. But it's actually not true. Charging by the hour, the system was forbidden by most of the bar associations until the 1950s. The problem is with the system, and this system doesn't take into account how much of your expertise is actually used for the work you carry out and the value of your work to the client. You invoice the same 1 hour when you give the most important, the most valuable work of your life, as when you just reviewed the standard contract similar to which you have seen 1,000 times already, and your client believes that you're overcharging him. So the charge by the hour system discourages everyone from being efficient and innovative. And as innovation may result in actually less human hours. So this is the system side. There is another side, and that's the people side, the lawyers. And that I'm going to tell you a story because this just perfectly fits to this. We were granted access to the biggest Hungarian CV database of lawyers a couple of months ago. I was working with a data scientist, Milan Janosov, who's also on this event. He's a great guy, and it was a fascinating research project we did together, and we had a couple of really interesting takeaways. Let me share with you a couple of them. less than 10% of the lawyers had any experience in non-legal areas. And when I say non-legal areas, I mean broadly, like from catering to hotel business, from teaching to whatever you wish, anything that is non-strictly speaking legal. Less than 5% of the lawyers have ever run a company. And roughly 15% have never held, only 15% have ever held a position at a company as a manager. So, I mean, if I have to sum up, I would say lack of experience, lack of leadership, lack of management skills, lack of experience in doing anything but law, and a lot of expertise in law. So, and look, this is what happens when you put a lot of people in a rigid system that discourages them from being efficient. So it's not a surprise that law is not full of innovators and entrepreneurs. And there are some excellent examples of innovations. I really admire everyone who is brave enough to do, brave enough to challenge the business model of law. But I don't think that it can change overnight. I think we need communities and teams and get-togethers like this one that can actually unleash innovation and entrepreneurship from lawyers, because the system does not, teach them to be. We don't train lawyers to be entrepreneurs. We don't train lawyers to be innovators. So I think only, kind of these teams like Jumpstart we're about to launch can trigger a lot of change in a community. Otherwise, nothing's going to change. That's how I see it.
No, I don't disagree with you. One of the comments that I've heard from recruiters in North America is that people come to her and say, look, I want to make X number of dollars a year. And then they say, okay, well, what business are you bringing in? And it's Y. And they said, well, do you not understand how the math works here? Just because you bring in Y, the amount of money that you actually make is not Y. It's a different matter. So you're right. There's a huge gap in terms of knowledge in that. And so let's just flip in. We have about 13 minutes left before the end of this call, but let's talk about data. I know data sciences and computer science is pretty near and dear to your heart. And so far, what we've heard from everybody on the panel is, we should just be making use of the same old stuff, like bring back boring, as Andrea mentioned. And so should we be boring or should we be bold?
Well, thanks very much for this question, especially for raising a question on computers and robotics without asking whether or not robots will replace lawyers, because I hate that question. And the legal press and every legal conference has been full of that question for a long time. And I hate it because it misses the point. I think the big question is how we can better serve our clients, how we can do our work more efficiently, and how we can increase access to justice. And in order to answer these questions, you have to know a lot of things about business, processes, HR, and also computers. I mean, you can't answer these questions without understanding what computers are capable of and what they are good at. Computers are good at a lot of things. A couple of things. Finding and extracting certain parts of sections from documents, filling out forms. Nothing new. Everybody knows this. This has been already proven by discovery applications, a lot of other software. Same applies to building processes and managing tasks. Everybody knows this very well. But I think we underestimate, mostly lawyers, we underestimate in computers in three areas. First, finding patterns in a large set of documents. That's number one. I think this is what called in computer language unsupervised learning. When basically you just you upload a large set of documents and let the computer to find the correlation, to find patterns among the documents, and you'll be surprised how good they can be in those cases. I was involved in one of these fraud cases at a financial institution where a very sophisticated machine learning algorithm was involved. And we just, basically they put down thousands or tens of thousands of documents, tens of thousands of printed documents of SMSs, emails and stuff and everything. And there were a lot of investigators involved, and they did not have a clue. And the computer actually showed some sort of pattern. We showed that during night, someone sent an SMS, that's the fraudster. And then no one has ever spotted that. Why? Because we have a pre-adjusted mindset to certain things. Computers do not have that. So when it's unsupervised learning, when we leave the computer to find a pattern, you'd be surprised how good they can be in certain situations. Number two, reviewing large set of documents. I mean, when you as a human, you've heard in a due diligence data room, we've done that, we all done that. We know how it was, how awful it is. If it's 100 document, you can actually keep the whole thing in your own mind. If you talk to your client, you can refer to each and every of them. But if it's 1,000, if it's 10,000, it's just too much to keep it in your mind. So what you will do, you will give it to your trainees or associates, and they will review it for you. But it's not the same thing. For the computer, it's still the same kind of computing power, and they can keep it in their own memory, tens of thousands of documents, and find patterns and do the thing what you're supposed to do. That's number two, where I think we're underestimating them. And third, drafting documents. They're actually good in drafting documents. We just have to train them. They're better in drafting an NDA than my trainees. Not because my trainees are not excellent. All of them are really, each and every of them, excellent trainees. But they make mistakes like every human does. And when you train a computer well, they're not going to make mistakes. It's one thing that they're not going to make mistake. They don't, it's pandemic proof. They've worked 24/7, no vacation, no Christmas break, no sick leave, no nothing. And also they're much faster than human capital. I think this is where we underestimate them. There is the dark side of the moon, and that's they lack context. From patterns, you can train your computer well, but if it can tell a couple of things, even very surprising things, like from a line of word, they can tell you whether or not this line was said sarcastically or not. However, they don't understand the meaning of words. So they can't apply laws and regulation to cases the way we as lawyers do. And if you know how they think, I can hardly foresee a software with the capability of doing that. So I can hardly see a software capable of interpreting laws to certain cases, because that's thinking in context. That's not a computer is good at. I mean, computers are not trained for thinking in context because it does not have any predefined knowledge of things. And I think this is exactly the differentiation, the big differentiating factor between humans and computers, that we think we are capable of thinking in context. That's what we're much better at. But we're much worse at a lot of things we do. So the future is going to be when we actually understand what computers are good at, and we know what humans are good at. And we use computers and machines for the things that are better, and we're using humans what they're better at. That's in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I get that all totally makes sense, except trying to implement that is a whole new thing. Now, just before we get to that, because we're running down the last 5 minutes. So there's a question from someone in the group, Gabor, who said, "What do you think of professional development activities within law firms? Are these functions affected by COVID? If so, in what sense? Would law firms cut back on training and knowledge management and that kind of investment? Or would they do the opposite and thinking of a professional development as a way forward?" And so why don't I just throw that, Andrea, why don't you answer that question first, and then anybody else in the group want to chip in?
Training and knowledge management are usually things where firms maybe start cutting costs, but actually those who are visionary, they realize that actually we have to retrain our lawyers. So instead of just stopping training, we have to retrain them, how they manage client relationships. So all these skills. And also we have to invest a lot in understanding digital trends and making the training in that direction, that our lawyers understand the new reality of the clients, because we focus in this discussion on the legal sector, but actually with most sectors, huge shifts will happen, and we have to understand those trends. We have to understand those shifts. And in most sectors, one of the major trends will be digitalization. So I think that, of course, there is a danger that these things will be cut. In fact, this should be one of the points where people could start working on the future and train people and also invest in knowledge management. First of all, to increase speed and responsibility, but also to harmonize services, to increase efficiency, keep margins as much as possible healthy.
Ellen, let me just bounce that to you, because that's you're at the coalface on this. The people that are getting cut, are they these people that, and if they're getting cut now, what does that mean for them in terms of their career prospects? And then what are the skill set? Like, are people, when you're searching for people, recruiting for people, is these kind of skill sets top of mind, or they just say we need some bodies that just crank out some paper, but not right now?
I think some of these law firms and in-house legal departments will keep building their own talent pools with people that they're cutting. So rather than make them, permanently redundant and saying goodbye, they'll try to offer some type of, continuous engagement, or by moving them to, again, their own freelance talent pool. And one of the ways to keep them will be to ensure that, they're continually upskill them. Technology will be tremendous, but you also will see people moving practice groups. You see law firms starting to look at BD a little differently in terms of not necessarily by practice, but by industry sectors. So we will also see people moving to non-legal roles, even though they may have been lawyers. And that's a trend a lot of people have been asking for. How soon that'll happen, because that's not, a revenue producing transition, is really the question. But all of these shifts are definitely coming. For many years now, there's been little incentive to hang around waiting for partnership. Even if there's a 7-figure income that awaits you, it just isn't, what someone's looking for. So keeping people in roles where they're happy, engaging them, training them, and making sure that there isn't this enormous waste of intellectual capital is very much key post-COVID-19.
Eric, any comments?
Yeah, just to add on to Aline's comments, another fact is that when I'm seeing law firms in Southern Europe, the ratio of fee earners versus non-fee earners is quite high, depending on how you want to look at it. We're talking about 85% fee earners for 15% non-fee earners. If you look at very well established and performant Northern European law firms, you're talking already about 50-50. So it is true that there is a shift from lawyers doing non-fee earning jobs as a support to the fee earners. That's one side of what has just been described. The other aspect, though, is that even though Miklos' enthusiasm is contagious in these virus days, but it is, touching technology for a lawyer is not the easy thing. I mean, I've been coding on automation, coding documents, and on some conferences, I lose people after 10 minutes because they fall asleep. So there is really it takes a mindset to be able to understand data, Miklos. It takes a mindset to understand how to handle them. And it's even more, it is a mindset to be able to prepare the data set, for example, to feed in an AI engine, or to make sure that your automation landscape goes beyond the simple 3 block of text coming in or out. So if you really want to use technology for legal in a very sophisticated and very performant manner, it takes a very, very deep concentration level, preparation level, and dedicated people that have the right mindset. That's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, well, Eric, welcome to my life. Welcome to my world. I could have said the same thing. I couldn't agree more with you. I just wanted to tell about the training side. I think, I mean, we have been talking about, knowing the law is not enough for like 20 years. When I started my career back in the 90s, we all said that it's not going to be enough. You have to know much more. But we haven't really trained our lawyers to evolve better lawyers and become even more. I think there are 4 areas I kind of try to list, and we do our best within our firm to train our lawyers on the longer run on these 4 areas. One is HR, the second is business and finance. The third is computer science and applied math, to at least to a very, very basic level. And the third is argumentation and persuasion, the art of persuasion. And in addition to that, I would like to just for a minute talk about a very important subject. That's the debate between being a specialist or a generalist, which has been around. It's basically the same topic. Whether we want to train specialists or we want to train generalists, what's going to be the future? I think it's yet again the wrong question. We're missing the point here. I think you may become a generalist if you're turning 50 and you have enough, you have such mental capacity in order to do that, to generalize. That's basically, you have to have a certain IQ level and you have to have a lot of things in order to get there. And in terms of specialists, I think we all agree that being a specialist is not enough. So I think it's something in between that what COVID's going to trigger is the same thing we have already started to talk about within our firm, is that you will have to choose at least 2 areas of practice and not one. And actually, if you're good at in 2 areas of practice, you will see synergies, and that's going to teach you how to generalize, how to become a better consultant. And you need a lot of years in that. We keep talking about the 10,000 hours. That's 6 years, and it depends on how many hours you charge, obviously, and a lot of things. If I look into your timesheet, it's going to be only 2 years. Otherwise, it's 10. But but I mean, it's the point. What I want to make here is that I think that's one of the potentially the future, is that having more expertise, similar to what most of the doctors are doing and have been doing for several decades, not necessarily doing one thing, but actually 2 or 3 on the longer run. And that make them an excellent doctor at the end of their careers.
Milos, excellent point. Listen, everyone, we got our hard stop. We've been going for 90 minutes. We could go for at least 90 more. But people get zoomed out. So I just want to say thank you for allowing me to be part of this. I hope people follow each of us on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever we're on. I think that there's a lot of valuable information on this group that is wise for everyone to be tapped. So Miklos, I'll let you do the final words.
Well, guys, thank you very much for joining. For all the over 80 people who have managed to join this event, thank you very much for joining. A special thanks for the team who helped us doing this whole event at Lexitup and all at Legalis and our firm OPL and Explicable. Thanks very much for helping us pulling together. Special thanks also for Daniel Rodriguez for coming and delivering an excellent keynote speech and answering great questions. And then panelists, it's been an honor to have you, Alan, also Andrea, Eric, and Mitch. Thank you very much. And for all of you, I really hope that you're all staying tuned about Jumpstart and a lot of new things coming our way in Hungary too.
Thanks.
Take care, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.